We now move to the public reports. Item 5.1, land east of 2 Newlandrig, Gorebridge. I welcome the Dickinsons. I'll ask the planning officer to talk about the process here.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to remind elected members who visited the site this morning, this notice of review is with regard to the temporary siting of a residential unit, effectively a mobile home, for 5 years on land east of 2 Newlandrig Gorebridge. The application was refused under delegated authority, and the review has been submitted for you to consider by way of a hearing, which means you will be receiving or hearing oral representation by the applicant, Mr. Dickinson, and by a plan officer, Duncan Robertson. So, Chair, whenever you're ready, the normal process is to hear from the applicant first for up to 5 minutes, and then from the plan officer, then for elected members to ask questions if they wish to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, and then at the end there's a chance to sum up both for the applicant and the planning officer. So if I could ask Mr. Dickinson to state his case. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I was going to bombard you with all the detail, but I think it's already in the information that I've sent in, which is hopefully being circulated around to the councillors. Where I do understand the pushback for development in the countryside, you know, the spread of urbanisation and these sorts of things, I think in this case it's very different. There's not many young farming families who are willing to invest hundreds of thousands of pounds of their own money into the land, the people of Midlothian, the landscape, biodiversity. You know, I think these things have been very overlooked and willing to be held accountable as well. You know, in my current and previous profession, I was held accountable every week by my peers and by members by public. You know, as the nature of that career. So, being held accountable is in my nature. So, you know, to apply for this for 5 years, I'm willing, and we are willing as a family, to be held accountable. This is a very viable business, and it will produce employment, it will improve the land, it will improve food for people, education for people, where food should come from. So and I've been very open and honest with the planning department of why we would like to sell our current home and move into what is effectively temporary accommodation, so we can use the funds to basically do all the things that we need to do to make it worthwhile. I mean, this is a 30-year project, but we're willing to show and be held accountable in 5 years that this is where we need to go with local food production for local people, for the environment and climate change. And you can reference it all, and you'll see all my reference points to the policies from the National Planning Framework and the Midlothian Development Plan. When I look through that, we tick all these boxes, so I'm honestly lost for words about why it would be refused. I mean, you can look at what would planning allow? Well, planning would allow a complete eradication of all pesticides, herbicides and artificial fertiliser, which is currently used, which, if anybody doesn't know how destroying that is to wildlife, especially soil. It would also eliminate all farm-related debt, which is pretty unheard of in these days, to have a debt-free farm. Also, I currently work in Glasgow, so it would eradicate that, so there would be no travel to Glasgow when it comes to emissions, car ownership, congestion, all these things. So there's a net reduction for travel-related environmental pollutants. The reasons for refusal were given that it wasn't a viable business. And we did submit accounts from our accountants to say that we are profitable with what we do. So I think that, to me, that seems like it's a bit of a void there. And also the sustainable location was another. They were the two reasons why to be refused. With regards to the location, it's not on prime agricultural land, it's not on a conservation area. The construction of the temporary home is very minimal. Any topsoil that's removed will be reused in food production. So there will be no waste. There will be some hardcore put down, and effectively the lodge is placed upon the hardcore. So it's very eco-friendly, very non-intrusive. So again, for these reasons, as you can tell, I'm a little bit bemused as to why it would be refused. You know, and you'll see all my comments. So I'm not going to bombard you with stuff, but you'll see the comments from the little things that were quite frustrating about, you know, security. Planning officer said that for security for machinery, tools, animals, fuel, these sorts of things, that passing traffic would be sufficient. And in my eyes, in this day and age, to say that passing traffic is enough of a security, to me, I think's not right. And there's loads of that in you'll see from my responses. But I'll just finish by saying that there is no negative impact on the people. You know, we've got access to mains water, electricity, so there's no infrastructure, you know, damage there to passers-by. There's only net positive effects to people, the wildlife, the landscape, and for economic development. The health and well-being of the people in the local community is the ethos of the farm, regenerative agriculture. That's what it's about: local food, local people, community, and connecting people back to the land. And that's, you know, this journey has been 6 years in the making so far. So it's and we're only just getting started. So that's it.
Thank you for that contribution. I now ask Duncan Robertson, the planning officer on the case, to give the position of the officers on this.
Thank you, Chair. This review case relates to a proposal for a new residential unit in the countryside. The planning application was refused for two main reasons: a lack of planning policy support and that the site is not in a sustainable location. Adopted planning policy clearly sets out the circumstances where development in the countryside is acceptable. The relevant policy protects against diminishing the quality of Midlothian's countryside through sporadic residential and other unjustified development. The relevant policy states that housing in the countryside will only be permissible where it is required for the furtherance of an established viable countryside activity, and it is demonstrated to be necessary to support the sustainable management of a viable rural business. There must also be an essential need for a worker to live permanently at or near their place of work. It has not been demonstrated that the residential unit is necessary to support the sustainable management of a viable rural business, or there is a need for a worker to live permanently at or near their place of work. The applicant currently owns the neighbouring property, which provides the full-time presence the applicant states is required. It has not been demonstrated to the satisfaction of the planning authority that the farm business is a viable operation which could support a residential unit at the site. In fact, the opposite is true, that the farm appears to require the sale of the current residential property to support it. The farm should support the residential property and its occupants, not the other way round. The farm appears to not be self-sufficient from the submitted information. The relevant policy states that new development should either be within 1 mile of services, such as shops or schools, or to a bus service of at least 1 per hour. This is to ensure that proposals in rural areas are located in sustainable locations. The site is more than 1 mile from the services and a bus service. This means that the majority of trips to and from the site will be done by car. This is not in line with the National Planning Framework's focus on sustainability and demonstrates the site is in an unsustainable location, hence the reason for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have questions from councillors either to the applicant or to the planning officer? Councillor Alexander, I think, was first on the call there.
You say that the site has all the necessary electricity and gas and and waste, etc. So I'm presuming then that the unit that you put on is going to be very, very eco-friendly, and that you're not actually building a building, it's like a prefabricated building.
Yeah, pretty much. It's basically off-the-shelf house, but it's yeah, it's built above the ground, so there's no concrete foundations. As I say, it's just 150 mil of hardcore, and we have electricity. We've actually got on the land. We've got mains, water pipes. There'll be no gas. It'll be electric for heating, etc. No oil. Then we've got a mains electricity supply as well. So it's there's no need for any major infrastructure changes. And yeah, it's eco-friendly, small, warm, timber lodge in a wooded area, which we have a felling licence for anyway, because if you read the notes, the area that it's in really poor health, and that's come from the Forestry Commission, so it needs to be thinned, and trees need to be felled in that area for it to really thrive. It's an ex-tree nursery, so it's just been left to, when I bought it, it'd been left to completely go wild, and we want to rectify that, so it's all part of the process. Sorry.
The other question that I wanted to ask was, how will you expand what you're doing just now?
Well, we currently do pastured eggs, and we can't even meet 50% of the demand. We've got people calling up asking for eggs. It's a very different process than how we do it. So we'll expand that. We could at least double the production of eggs, and then we obviously want to go into vegetable production. We used to do salad leaves as well in polytunnels, and we will do beef and lamb and pork and these things. But it's all regenerative, so it all has to come back to the land, and it's all in one cycle. So each enterprise will companion the other. So obviously we'll double our egg numbers, but we can't go too big because it's all about how much can the land withstand without being, it's farming with nature. And that's part of also the eco-friendliness of the build. Again, it's all wooden. It'll all be locally sourced, responsible timber, built on a frame, a mobile frame. So, if need be, if the council think we're not as viable as which I know we will be in 5 years, you could effectively say that's it. So, hence why the accountability. So, there's lots of enterprises in our future, but it's very capital intensive at the onset.
Thank you.
Councillor McManus.
Go on. Thank you. My question is to planning, and it's mainly around do we possibly have a gap in our planning policy in regards to sustainable farming? Because I know that it's quite a new practice. There's not a lot of people that go into farming these days, and thank you very much for that, because it's nice to hear that people are still interested in producing for local communities. So it's just really a question of, is there a bit of a gap there, and is that something we should be generally looking at?
That's perhaps a policy question. Duncan, could you respond to that?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Councillor. There's lots of policies within the National Planning Framework and our own local development plan which support residential development in terms of farm diversification, but also ongoing farming. It is not specifically related to sustainable farming, but we are supportive of farming practices. And obviously we are moving down sustainable farming routes, and the Planning Authority is supportive of the business that Mr Dickinson is carrying out. It's just the problem is what he has at the moment is not demonstrating that business is yet viable enough for us to support the housing. So if it's sustainable farming or traditional farming, the arguments have still got to be made that there has to be a viable business there to support the house. And at the moment, we've not got that demonstrated. Mr Dickinson's advised us that he's not paying himself a wage, for example. That's not demonstrating that there's a viable business there. But if he was able to take money from that farm to pay himself, then perhaps at some point down the line there would be a viable business, be it sustainable farming or traditional farming, that we could support a house on, like we have in other circumstances.
Just to touch on that, it's in my notes that obviously I work elsewhere, so there'd be no point in me paying myself from the farm. So, as I said, if planning approval allows, it completely eradicates. I will be full time, as will my wife, in the business. It's on the accounts, you know. It gets rid of all overheads. So then I'll pay myself and my wife a salary, which was in the notes. So it's I don't see why that isn't viable, and that would happen almost immediately.
Councillor McKeon.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I welcome this application, and can I just say as a comment, Chair, before all the questions, I don't think it's in our gift to substantiate whether this business is going to be viable or not. We're here to discuss a planning matter. It's a matter for the applicant himself to decide how he's going to invest, diversify and develop his business. And if he's willing to sell his house and put the proceeds into a business, I think that's got to be welcomed for the local community here in Midlothian to create employment. So I welcome that. My question is, when I visited the site this morning, I couldn't help thinking the care you had taken to locate the temporary accommodation where it was, completely out of sight, if anything, from the main roadway or the main footpaths or anything coming through Georton. So welcome that. I take it that was a consideration you made yourself to locate the temporary accommodation there.
Yeah, it was just a nice part. I never actually thought, probably should have brought your wellies, but you know, it's very unintrusive. There's no, you can't see it from the road. It's kind of out the way, and it's just a really nice place for a small lodge. So that was all part of the plan.
Thank you for that. You said it was a 30-year business, and this is a 5-year planning application. What's your long-term interest in having residential facilities there?
Well, hopefully in 5 years' time there will be no issues, and we can just stay where we are. So when I talk about a 30-year project, I mean, agriculture is a bit of a slow burner. You know, it's especially when it comes to tree planting, which we will do. I mean, these are 30, 40 years, and effectively be my kids that probably benefit from that side of the business. But that's where the longevity and the succession comes in. So part of the 5-year thing was again, one, to prove that I'm going to be accountable for my actions, and also going forward, then if everything's fine, we can stay there. Or, I think it just shows willingness that how much we believe in what we're doing, and it's also cost effective too. If I start digging up the ground to put a big dwelling in there, a permanent dwelling, then one, it's not environmentally friendly, and two, it's not cost effective, because building a house these days costs a fortune, and it's not very eco-friendly. So part of the mobile residence was, one, cost, two, being practical with materials, etc., and again, just being part of the ethos of regenerative agriculture.
Thank you for that. I guess you're clear that this is just a 5-year application, and that if you wanted to continue, you'd have to come back to the council at that date, and we can't bind our successors. So it is strictly for 5 years.
I understand.
Councillor McEwen.
Therefore, on that basis, the applicant's well understands the implications, so I would move to grant, Chair.
Councillor Alexander.
I think this is an excellent project, and I'm possibly quite jealous. And it ticks all the boxes for me: the sustainability, the local produce, and the house. So I am quite happy to second Councillor McEwen.
Councillor McManus.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just off the back of the two other councillors there, I just wanted to say that on a side rather than a question, that I think it is actually fantastic that someone is going into farming in this day and age. It's not common, especially when it's sustainable farming, and the fact that you're willing to take that risk to make that leap and invest in something that you believe in is something we should support. And especially the green aspect of it. It's the direction of travel we want to go, and you're making an example for many people, and it's going to benefit the community, like you say, and access to local food, access to local produce. I mean, this morning we were there and we saw there was 2 people very disappointed they had missed their egg opportunity. So I can see that your demand is there. I mean, we were only there for 5 minutes, you know. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. I think it's a brilliant project, and hopefully other people take inspiration from what you do.
Thank you. I suspect the will of the House is that we overturn the officer's initial recommendations. I have to say I understand why they brought it so that we preserve a rural character, but in this occasion I think all of us are content for the officer's recommendation to be overturned and for the appeal to be allowed. Conditions.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, if the committee's minded to grant planning permission, there are some planning conditions which are in the paperwork which I put in on a sort of non-prejudice basis, so subject to the committee's instruction, are they happy for those conditions to apply to the grant of planning permission?
There being no additional or subtraction involved. Thank you for that. Thank you for attending the committee.